we're going to talk about how to spot fish that are rising. In other words, you can't really catch the fish unless you find them. You have to find them. The way to locate them a lot of times is to look for rises. Now in the mountains, and this is in a mountain stream, in a canyon, got beaver dams, beaver ponds. What you want to do in a place like this is look for the rises. It seems obvious. Now one place that's neglected by a lot of people is below the dam. When you approach, take a while and look and see what's going on. Quite often, even though the water may be very shallow there'll be fish rising there if you wait and watch. Now these are good sized trout here. These are probably 12, 14 inches long. Now another place to fish is in bigger rivers, and it's a little different situation. It's the water is kind of broken up, and it's bigger. It's not as obvious when one rises. You need to train yourself to look for the rises. Now there are fish rising in this section along the edge of the current. They're not breaking the water very much. They're just coming up and sipping things in. You need to develop an eye for this. Just because it doesn't make a big splash or anything doesn't mean it's a small fish. These are 12 to 18 inch long trout or better that are rising here. Every one of them. There's no minnows in this section here. These are all mature trout. They're rising to midges here, tiny midges, so you can't really see what they're taking, but they're coming up on a regular basis. If you see trout rising this often, and not in heavy water, but in the edges, they're probably taking something very small. Now you notice you can't see the trout very well because of the light situation. Even with polarized glasses, the light is too difficult here to see the fish. When possible, it's good to get the light behind you. In this case, it's not. It's coming down at an angle, and the water is riffled up, and it's difficult to see these fish. But just look for these tiny indications. Sometimes, of course, you see them come up, and it looks really significant. Usually, the fish rising are taking emergers or crippled insects drifting in the current like this. You notice you don't see anything flying around. If it were a big hatch like green drakes or big stoneflies, you'd see the insects, but you don't. These are small insects that are being taken just under the surface or right at the surface, and they're sipping it down. These are big trout. They're not little trout. Now a different situation is a nice sunny day with the sun behind you. And if you approach carefully with the sun behind you and don't put a shadow on the water and have polarized glasses, you can see the fish rising. And these fish are rising similar to the ones we saw before, but you can see the fish here. You notice they're not making a big disturbance. They're coming up and taking small insects off the top. In this case, these fish are taking tiny mayflies, and mostly they're taking the emerging mayflies. Very, very small insects. They're coming up and taking them right off the surface. They're not taking emergers swimming up. They're taking emergers that are floating along in the drift, or adults or cripples, or that are floating along in the drift. Notice they're in the edge, not in the main current. When fish are taking small, tiny insects, they tend to get in smoother currents at the edges. They prefer to feed there. It's not as much effort. They naturally try to feed in the most energy efficient way. And saying efficient, not a play on words, but just efficiency in the fact that they don't have to use much effort to get the maximum amount of food. Fishing in a spot like this with several rising, there's a lot of potential to catch these fish, but you have to approach carefully, and you have to be sure that you don't cast on top of the fish. It's better to cast from the side or do some sort of a curve cast so your line and leader, or at least the butt of your leader, don't go over the fish. In this case, you'd want a fairly long leader, a light tippet, quite flexible, maybe 6X, so that the fish wouldn't be frightened by the shadow or something. These fish are confidently feeding. If you don't scare them and throw the right thing, they'll cast the right thing and drift with a good drip. You'll catch these fish. The good drip is not easy here though, because the water is not smooth. The current's not coming along in a smooth direction. It's kind of moving around from side to side. So there's some thoughts on rising fish. Hope it helps.